My name is Oriana Borelli, and I am a member of the Winter 2020 BioClock Studio. Today we are interviewing Emily Manoogian, postdoc researcher at Salk Institute in Dr. Sachin Panda's lab.
My name is Emily Manoogian. I'm a postdoctoral fellow working with Sachin Panda at the Salk Institute. I didn't know that I always wanted to be a scientist. Before that, when I was very young, I originally wanted to be a tap dancer. I competed in tap for a long time and still do some tap. And then I wanted to be a lawyer, and then I didn't want to do that much paperwork, so I decided I didn't want to be a lawyer. And actually, I used to hate science. I used to love math, and I didn't like science when I was younger until I got to high school. And then I started to become very interested, and I was originally pre-vet. And then I took a class called Hormones and Behavior with Lance Kriegfeld at UC Berkeley, and I became obsessed with the class to the point where my roommate said she could take the test because I talked about it so much. And I basically bugged him until I got into his lab. And then I worked in his lab for a couple years and then went to grad school, and from there I kind of knew that's where I was going to be. But I blame Lance completely for getting me to be a researcher. Yeah, so I worked with hamsters as an undergraduate and in grad school. It was quite a switch from hamsters to humans from grad school to postdoc. A lot of it was just wanting to be able to translate a lot of the work that I was able to do in hamsters. I mean, it was a lot of really interesting basic mechanics, and I still love that world. But I got to hear some of Sachin's work when I was in grad school, and I just found it so fascinating. It's like this system that I'm so in love with could be applied to people. And so that's kind of what took me there. The other thing is a lot of the reasons why I wasn't as interested in human circadian biology to begin with is because until recently there hadn't been as many tools to be able to assess these things without these really intensive lab environments, which are hard to replicate. And with technology, with continuous glucose monitors and ActiWatches and other things that are kind of developing, we're able to get a much better picture and kind of answer questions that we couldn't have answered before. Yeah, watching my own TED Talk is hard, but yeah, either watch it without the sound or only the sound. Yeah, so when preparing for a TED Talk, it was really exciting just to be able to kind of share what you do. It was a really interesting experience because they don't write your script for you at all, but they really work with you to kind of figure out how to say things and what's interesting and what isn't interesting to people that don't do what you do. And so that experience of like learning how to tell a story in a way that is appealing to a large group of people and still gets across the points that I want to was really exciting. And then just to be able to share what I do all the time with not just my friends and family, but with anyone who wants to watch it on YouTube was really special. So the studies with the firefighters are still ongoing. We have some preliminary data. I think one of the most interesting things about it is, I don't know, just learning about these shift work schedules to begin with. Because before we were able to start the study, we had to really dive into okay, you hear 24-hour shift work schedule. What does that really mean? What does it look like? How many days in a row are you working? And then just learning about shift work in general. I could give you any hours of any day and make up any days of the week, and that's someone's actual shift work schedule. Like, you say shift work, it could be almost anything. And that was just kind of mind-blowing. Firefighters have been really cool because they are on shift work, they have these really disrupted rhythms, but they still have some preservation of a day-night schedule. They're still most active during the day. They still get to sleep at night between calls. So it was kind of this cool little middle point. Because of that, it's also much easier to intervene. And what's been exciting with them is they've really have been able to comply to a time-restricted eating window. We are seeing some benefits there. We aren't seeing any negative side effects, which is also really important because if we're going to apply some, like a large kind of overarching, everyone should do time-restricted eating, we want to make sure it's not going to hurt somebody too. So that was really exciting to see that even with that complicated schedule, they were not having a problem. They don't feel hungry at night. They don't feel tired at night when they're doing these fasts. And so I think that's really promising for other shift work schedules. But because other shift work schedules can be so complicated, there's definitely new challenges that we don't have the answers for yet. But I think it's a good push in the right direction. Our lab actually started to make a list. So if you're looking at how many people or how many different diseases are affected by circadian disruption. So it's actually kind of funny. So my advisor, Dr. Panda, actually sent a Google sheet out to everyone in the lab and all the former lab members and said, list all the diseases you know are linked to circadian disruption. We have over 100 on the list, most with citations, and the list kind of just kept growing. I mean, it was a matter of how specific you got, really. And it's hard to find diseases that aren't at least somehow exacerbated by circadian disruption. And I think it makes sense when you think of circadian health as kind of a pillar of how your body works. It's like one of the main mechanisms. So if you take that system out, you're gonna make things worse in almost every scenario. There are many diseases that we talk about pretty frequently that we know directly are very exacerbated by circadian disruption, like cancers and metabolic diseases and cardiovascular diseases. But getting into specific subtypes, I think we don't even know because a lot of them haven't been tested yet. But the list goes on. I mean, if you're talking about affective disorders, and I think, everyone, even if you don't have a mood disorder, if you're being sleep deprived for long periods of time, you're probably going to get a little moodier. We can all kind of know what that feels like. Or if you get really badly jet lagged, you just don't feel quite right for a while, your stomach might be off, you might feel ill or not sleeping right. So we all kind of know how it feels. But how it relates to every disease, I think the list is longer than we know, and it's unfortunately still pretty poorly understood which ones are the worst or which ones are the best. But I think there's no known number, but it's got to be high. It's got to be a high number. So really is our circadian kind of studies and findings being applied to modern medicine and kind of current health. We're starting to get there. It's going to be slow. I think. One big problem is that circadian rhythms are not taught in medical school at all. So the doctors that are aware of it really are those that are really on top of the research and or know someone and kind of was brought into that world and are really interested in it. There are some kind of general things that have come out that like don't eat too late at night or eat regular meals. That's kind of been around there. It hasn't always been based on circadian science, but kind of these general knowledge where sometimes we get things like that. Or even just like get good sleep or sleep regularly, that are probably accidentally tapping into the circadian system, which are generally good advice. But unfortunately, it hasn't gotten into the medical field as much as I'd like. I think that's a big shift that we need to make because, especially when we're talking about eating patterns, where we're saying, quantity of food is important, quality of food is important. I think the timing of food is the other third part of that. And if we ignore it completely, don't even know that it's something to be aware of course we're going to disrupt that because we think it doesn't matter. Even just being aware of it, you're probably going to make better choices than if you had no idea. So I'm hoping that kind of knowledge starts to push more into the medical field. There are definitely some doctors I've spoken to that are doing this, but it's the rarity that's happening right now. And so I'm hoping that in the next few years this will start to become more common knowledge and become more kind of general advice. And we need more research to back it up so they can give advice that we know is good. Yeah, so in human circadian research, I think the big steps we're looking at are both getting better tools to measure kind of passively what's going on in a person. So continuous glucose monitors have been a big step forward in that, where we're not just saying this is your glucose under one scenario or one specific test, but when you're actually living your life and you're eating all these different foods, how is your glucose really regulated? I think that's been a huge, advancement. And I think we're going to get a lot more sensors coming forward, and there's already some really cool stuff coming out from UCSD and other places that are getting more at these kind of intricate physiological measures where the participant doesn't have to do anything. We can leave it on for days at a time, and so we can get an understanding of what's going on. And once we get those kind of combined data, the continuous things, then I think we can really understand how some of these things play together, which will be huge. And then the other thing is just education, getting, circadian health put into medical schools, getting it to be part of, kind of general common knowledge. I've always said one of my career goals is just to have circadian be like a common word that people know what it means. And you're starting to hear people use it sometimes, and that always gets me really excited when someone just says circadian to me and they have no idea what I do. I'm like, that's really awesome. But I think a lot of it's just education and getting it out there. And then obviously we need more research, but and on a bigger scale, because human circadian research is, there's some really amazing work that's been done, but it's nothing compared to the scale of a lot of other disease work. And so understanding how it can play into all these different physiological systems that it affects is going to take some time. But once we kind of get that together, hopefully all grow together and get to apply all that research to the common knowledge that everyone understands that circadian rhythms are important. I think that's kind of the goal.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so what are my plans for the future and being an advocate for circadian health? So part of it is just giving talks and reaching out in different ways. The TED Talk was a great way to be able to speak out, but we don't always get that opportunity. I think going to schools and talking to kids about it is always a really great way to do it. And writing different kinds of pieces and working with journalists, so you're not only writing your kind of scientific articles, but trying to reach out to other forums, I think is really important. And so even just like getting training in communication, like learning how to tell a story to different groups, or learning how to make an infographic, and working with like BioClock Studio or other people that can really help go beyond what your skills are and say, okay, this is how we're going to tell this story, and we can create a cool image for you so people can relate to it. I think that's really important, and so I think that's part of what I've been trying to do, is learn new ways to communicate my science. Moving forward, I want to continue human circadian research and really kind of find new ways that we can, time-restricted eating and probably other integrative ways that we can have behavioral circadian interventions that are completely free. Anyone can do them. Obviously, there's ways to monitor it that could be expensive, but you don't have to. You can just stop eating. So I'm hoping we can find new ways to do that and integrate that into kind of both treatment, but really preventative health.
All right, well, thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. Good?
That was awesome. Yeah, absolutely. That was great.
Thank you
Perfect.
so much.
Yeah, no, thank you for having me.